college, I had walked onto the football team my sophomore year, but a severe injury outside of that where I was walking across campus and suddenly the ground caved in on me. I slipped in about thigh deep to a boiling pit of water. You can't compete. You got to be eliminated. And I'm like, I'm not quitting. I'm going for this thing. Like, well, God, you brought me to this point, and at least if I go out, I'll go out saying I put it all on the line.
So on the show, I'm excited to have No Limits Nate. He is a previous American Ninja Warrior professional. He's doing it for 6+ years. He is a man of God, loves Jesus with all of his heart. He is in the process of writing a book, speaks around the country, has done so many things internationally, and is overall a great human being. I'm excited to have him on the show.
I saw opportunity. At the same time, I didn't see what I wanted to become in my environment. I looked through the lens of kingdom versus Christianity. There's a lot of religion in Christianity where we're doing things we don't fully understand why, and there's not always life in it. I decided, you know what? Lust, casual sex, some of these things had been a struggle in my life. And as I gave my life fully to Jesus, what does it look like to fully live with integrity, accountability, and to prepare for my future marriage? I heard a phrase, give God something to work with and people something to respect. If we do those things, we'll be amazed at what our life is going to look like in a year.
My name is Skylar Lewis, and I've helped thousands of men and their families step into their God-given potential. And this podcast is all about that. We bring on some of the highest performing men in the areas of faith, family, fitness, and finances, where they share their success principles, they share their struggles, they share the specific things that they have done to build a life of abundance and kingdom impact. Don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get to the episode.
Fierro pariente means let's go in Espanol.
There we go, baby. Yeah, man, I'm excited to have you at the new HQ.
I pulled up. I was here a year ago, not at this place, but at your ranch, getting to meet you and hear about your vision and your ministry. And so as I came back here, it's pretty cool to see this place 10X, the reach, the impact, and obviously the facility is mind blowing. So I'm itching to get out there and play on some things as well. But for now, we'll have a good conversation.
Yeah, we got about 50 guys showing up in about an hour. Gen Z, 18 and 26-year-olds, going to be a very special event. A lot of our coaches are here. I think we have like 4 or 5 of our coaches here for this event. So yeah, you'll be able to catch a glimpse of some of the things that we do, firsthand at this event. But yeah, man, I'm grateful to have you on the show, and you just have a wild story, your past, what you've done with American Ninja Warrior, your involvement in ministry, your background, there's just so much. So let's start out. So you're a pastor's kid, right? So let's talk about that for a moment. How was that growing up as a pastor's kid, and what were some of the benefits? What were some of the challenges?
Yeah, grew up a preacher's kid, oldest of 5 kids. Mostly in the South. So born in Tennessee, went to Arkansas, ended up in Louisiana, moved to Texas after I graduated college. So most of my experience was in the South, small towns, small churches. Dad was a Southern Baptist preacher, had a broader theology basis. So I'd consider us non-denominational. Growing up in that, saw my dad act as a very faithful man, a lot of character. Also on the negative side, still bound by religion. And so now I look through the lens of kingdom versus Christianity. There's a lot of religion in Christianity where we're doing things we don't fully understand why, and there's not always life in it. So my experiences was I saw the faithfulness, the sound doctrine of the Bible. I believed in God, but I also never fully experienced a real relationship with Jesus. I saw a lot of religious practice. I saw a lot of hypocrisy in the church. I saw broken mindsets. I saw a lot of poverty. I'm like, okay, you don't have to be wealthy to be a believer. And I see a lot of examples of people who aren't successful in this worldly mindset, and yet they're strong believers living for an eternal purpose and living for the kingdom. But I saw a lot of lack as well, a lot of unhealthy people in South Louisiana. And it always bothered me how this 50, 60, 80 pound overweight man was dogging on me for some mindset. You got lust issues you got to fix, or, these kids out here drinking alcohol, or these kids doing these sexual things. And I'm like, well, I agree with the point you're making, and yet you seem like a hypocrite because you haven't learned to discipline yourself or take value in your body as being a temple. Or this other person who was strong in a certain moral sense, and yet they were broken in their finances. And again, we don't need to be wealthy to be good Christians. At the same time, I saw this poverty mentality and this lack. And so I was raised in this dichotomy of, of a great faith. My parents lived by faith, have some incredible stories and testimonies. They were faithful. And yet there was always this seemingly limited perspective of how they could live out their faith. And it caused me, one, to say, I don't want to become a pastor because they deal with some crap. And trying to address issues that arise in the church. I also didn't like the very limited resources that we grew up in. So I thought, well, what would it look like for me to do something different? And that led me kind of, I wouldn't say leaving my faith, but stepping away from what you're quote unquote supposed to do as a good Christian, which is basically going to ministry. And there's no other option. And I was like, I'm more drawn into physics, science, math. What could I do with that? And I saw a path toward engineering. So that guided me down. I'm going to go be an engineer. And what would that look like? And how could that be successful? And that led me down a different road that is later come full circle, that God's used all of that backstory and the athletics and the corporate world, the engineering and the global experiences to then give me a unique skill set to now speak in the lives of people from a place of kingdom and the transformation of our identity that happens in that. So religion, I grew up in it, saw some good things, saw some places that I thought were broken. And instead of completely fighting against it, and I said, what would it look like for us to be fully well-rounded? I believe in being a well-rounded warrior. And so as we operate from an identity as a child of God, and from that place, how do we fully develop and steward our fitness, our finances? Obviously, our faith is one of the main components. And then in family, what does it look like to be a good man, a good leader, a good husband, a good father, and a good son? And breaking off some of the false identities we've experienced through our earthly fathers, which are all broken. Some are much further along than others, but changing that identity in revelation, going through forgiveness. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I like to live my life through an element of fun because, we're always seeking the goal, the end, and it feels like we've never arrived. And I have to remind myself to enjoy the process, find ways to have fun in there, reward myself, discipline myself to then build towards a fun reward.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that. I can't wait to dive into the topic of fun because, all right, everybody knows our pillars: faith, family, fitness, and finances. But the fun is just a great addition to make progress on. What and so you so growing up, right? You grew up in that environment. You went into the corporate world, right? You were an engineer,
mechanical engineer.
Yeah,
got a job with ExxonMobil.
Okay,
which, as I went through high school, played a few sports, but we homeschooled from time to time. I was a small, skinny kid, didn't have a lot of confidence or experience in the sports world. So tried baseball one year, sucked, didn't do it again. Got into tennis in high school because no one was playing tennis. Where I came from in South Louisiana, football was king, kind of like Texas.
Tennis,
they had words for you if you played tennis, but it was also, I won't say them on here, but I don't fully know the audience. But I'll leave it at that. So I still like to compete, and I saw my competitive nature, and it gave me an outlet with a lower competition pool to try a sport, develop, teach myself a lot without a lot of resources. We didn't have money for good equipment. We didn't have money for lessons. So I just read magazines, tried to figure out this process, competed my way up, and saw a part of me that can rise to the occasion. Went to college, learned how to actually discipline my body, eat well, work out, bulked up, put on 65 pounds. So went from like 130 to 195 in about a year and a half. Loved football when I was younger, but never thought that would ever be a possibility. So I didn't even try. And then when I got to college at Louisiana Tech University, I began playing a lot of flag football with some of the guys from the team. And they're like, dude, you're as good as us. You should try it for the team. And I'm like, I think that's possible. So I began dreaming in a certain sense of pushing myself athletically to another level. At the same time, I was focused on being there as an engineer. So I was working through that process of both doing the work, studying, and then figuring out how do you make it in this world. So people told me, get an internship. So I got an internship, worked my way through that to leverage it so that I could get an internship with a better company. And at the time, Exxon was a Fortune #1 company. So I was like, well, that's a good one to go for, right? And then I heard the oil and gas environment paid a lot more money than a traditional manufacturing environment. I was like, cool, I want to go for that. Why not maximize it? You're already going to be working hard. Ended up getting a job with ExxonMobil, moving to Houston. And so I began building the career. And at the same time, I'm still trying to be an athlete in the sense of taking care of my body. In college, I had walked onto the football team my sophomore year, but a severe injury outside of that where I was walking across campus and suddenly the ground caved in on me. I slipped in about thigh deep to a boiling pit of water from a steam pipe that had ruptured. Oh, who knows how long before that.
Wow. What a unusual
strange thing. So I spent a month in the ICU.
Oh, man.
And couldn't walk for a while. I was in a wheelchair.
Wow.
Took me about a year to mostly recover from that. that kind of ended the football side of things. And I was like, well, you know, athletics is never guaranteed, but let's use our mind. And I began to discipline myself in the engineering world, got a job, moved to Houston, started that world.
So then you went into, so that's interesting. So you then dove into, let's talk for a moment about your experience with American Ninja Warrior. Like, what was that process? What was that process like? And so you seem like the type of guy that definitely goes after his dreams, right? That
I am now. I did not always.
Okay.
I played it safe.
Okay.
More so in the prior point of life.
When did that shift?
So the progress through the career in the Ninja Warrior, I was about 2 years in working with ExxonMobil, doing well, growing in my projects, getting sent across the country now instead of just in my area based in Texas. And long story short, I had an early life crisis. I realized, man, I'm making more money than I ever thought was possible from where I came from. My dad at best made 40 grand a year. He worked full-time as a pastor and part-time as a construction worker, painter, carpenter. So now I started with a 100 grand a year salary, which was huge to me. And then I'm getting 20% raises every year, good performance. They're fast tracking me and saying, hey, you've got management potential. This could be a great career for you. So I'm starting to see a potential pathway. And it was awesome in the sense that, wow, I could make it in this world. I was good in health. I was great in friendships. I felt pretty good in life. I was fairly moral. And I thought, man, I'm doing great right now. This is kind of above my dreams of what I thought life would look like. At the same time, I realized I'm also kind of miserable, like having my life mapped out for me. I see people 10 and 20 years ahead of me. Their marriages are failing. Their health is failing. They've got a lot of money. They're doing good in the business world, but they're all complaining constantly. Oh, this is terrible. Or my marriage failed and I just lost half of what I've done. And so I saw opportunity. At the same time, I didn't see what I wanted to become in my environment. So I started going, man, is this it? Like I'm relatively happy, and yet I feel like I have no purpose. I'm just kind of serving myself. I'm selfish. I'm still playing God's.
How old were you at that point?
I was 25 into 26 at that point. So
right. It's interesting. Some people just hit that point so much earlier.
Yeah,
right. They're kind of midlife crisis, but you hit it at 25,
yes.
saying, "Hey, I want to live a more meaningful. I want something different than just the standard."
Yeah. So and I also was thinking, I've still living by some standards. Like at that point, I'd had sex a few times with a couple different women, but I also had a vision of I don't want to just fully imbibe in the world. I kind of have a hedonist mentality in the sense that I want to enjoy things to the fullest, but within a moral bound and knowing it's not taking away from my future. So I'm not going to spend money on a credit card. I'll save it and then buy things appropriately. But I would still buy things that I liked or enjoyed. And I was trying to treat that in certain aspects. But I realized, man, I have all these moral codes I'm living by, but I don't see a deeper sense of purpose. I don't have a real relationship with God like I see other people talk about. I see people raising their hands in worship and crying and having these experiences. I'm like, that's like stupid to me. Like, is that real? So I'm asking God loosely, if there's more to life, I want to see and experience it. And if all this stuff I believe about God is false, I'm tired of living this way with all these restrictions. I want to go have some real fun and do some real life and make it about me in a bigger sense. So I got to this wrestling match, this early life crisis. Long story short, God really met me there in some incredible ways. I opened up my mind to some of the restrictions I've been raised in religion, and Southern Baptists are notorious for being very strict and straight-laced and not believing in God still moving in bigger ways. Loosely they will. Like, yeah, we still believe God heals, but they don't speak or work towards those things.
Yeah. Very
restrictive mindset. So I got exposed to we'll call it a little bit more charismatic environment and group. Had a pretty powerful experiencing God's presence for the first time, like really began opening up about the things I was struggling with porn, with an identity crisis, like who am I? What am I living for? Being open, because I grew up always caring about what people thought of me, how they viewed me. And so it led me to, one, playing it safe in most things I did, because I would be defined by my success or failure. So when I went forward in football in college, while I had an injury that set me back, I didn't fully commit to it because I was worried, what if I don't make it? What if I get rejected by that? If I really liked a girl, I'd tiptoe around the thought of showing her interest, because if I fully said, hey, I'm really into you, and she rejects me, then I feel I've been defined by that rejection versus, okay, no big deal.
Have you read that book, The Growth and Fixed Mindset?
I've heard of it. I've read some clips from it.
So that's a specific breakdown. Some people, or like I see the difference with both of my boys. I have an 8-year-old boy, Jeremiah, and an 11-year-old boy, Brendan, and my 8-year-old is willing to go all in on things and give all of himself and try it 100%. But Brendan really smart kid, but he will only do things if he's good at them.
Yeah.
He'll only, if he can tell he's not that good, he'll just like, I'm not going to do it at all.
Yeah.
Only if he's pretty decent will he step into something. And that's the growth. So the growth mindset states that, hey, through the process of practice and learning and doing these things, you will become better. The fixed mindset says, no, I only have so much talent. I only have so much ability. So I'm only going to use it where I know I can make the biggest impact.
That's good.
And a growth mindset's like, no, I want to go risk it. I want to go take some chances. I'm going to go step out in faith. I'm going to go fail because I know that failing will help me grow. And a lot of people have that fixed mindset. So we've been trying to tweak it with my son and help him break free and take some risks and be willing to step into. Don't do things that you're good at, man. Only go try new things that you're going to suck at and be miserable at, and then see if you can excel in them.
That's good. So it sounds like you can see the dichotomy between your two sons' mindsets. And I was probably both in that I'm an analyzer as an engineer and a contemplator, and yet I have a heart of going for it. So as I get to this all in with God place, and I heard Deuteronomy 4:29, it says, if you seek me with all your heart and all your soul, that's where you'll find me. Well, we know God's pursuing us, but when we turn that attention and say, God, I'm all in, that's the change that I saw for the first time in my life. I'm going to stop worrying about the outcomes, what other people think of me. I'm going to be all in this place and seek first, Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God, his righteousness, which means his way of doing things, and let everything else fall into place. And I realized I was trying to stack other lower priority things and elevate them. So I made that mindset shift. I gave God my full heart. I didn't know what it was going to look like. And over the next 18 months, I saw a serious transformation in my spirit, in my mindset, in my identity. And it changed from being defined by the things I would possibly fail at into because I'm a child of God, because I'm a champion internally, I can try things and just learn through the process. They no longer define me. So as I had that,
there's so much freedom in that.
It was incredible.
So much freedom and peace.
Some of it's now natural to me. Some of it I still have to discipline myself to live that way and get reminders from men like yourself. So in that new place, I thought in that place, when I fully committed to God, I also thought the Christian thing to do would be, now you quit your job and you move to Africa and you become a missionary, which was the ultimate torment and horrible job in my mind. And I'm like, God, even if it's that, I'm going to trust that you made me. You know what I'm called to do. You're going to bless me and give me joy in that versus me living life by my terms. So that was my mental choice. And yet as I went through that process, suddenly I didn't have this conviction to go do that. I had peace to stay where I was, and my job took off even more and it multiplied. I had a lot of blessing in the projects I was doing, a lot of favor there. And so as things played out, like, all right, God, what does it look like for me to do? That's when a friend sent me a YouTube video saying, have you heard of this show, American Ninja Warrior? And I had still been keeping myself disciplined and exercise and working out, just thinking maybe something will come along in my future that's I can go for it in the athletic world. That pops up. I hear it's an application process to get on the show. It wasn't as hard back then as it is now because it was still up and coming. But I was like, I'm going to go for that. So I made some announcements for the first time, like on Facebook and a few other places, like, I saw this TV show, I'm going to go for it. Now, my mindset normally is, I'm going to go secretly do the thing. And once I've accomplished it, then I'll make the announcement and talk about it. But I learned that was just the fear of failure. And so the change was, I'm willing to talk about these things I'm going to do, and I'm going to go for it. Now they're going to hold me accountable. So I started going for it, and I was willing to fully lay it on the line. And we could talk a little bit about the journey of a lot of rejection through applying and getting rejected, applying, getting rejected.
How many times did you apply and get rejected?
Applied the first 2 years and got rejected those 2 years. Wow. My third year was when they finally accepted me. And I was living overseas in Africa at the time on a project and training over there. But in that process of that mindset change, I was like, I'm going to go for it anyway. And because I was so weighted with the burden of regret from some high school times of not even trying, college, trying, but not giving it my full 100% effort, that Deuteronomy 4:29, seek with all your heart. And that's what a coach asks for us, is give us 100%. I don't need you to compare your 100% with my 100% because our outputs are going to look different. Our strengths are different. But God always asks us to give what's in our heart. And that's a stewardship principle.
It's so rare that men actually give all of themselves. It's funny.
We protect ourselves.
On our intake sheet for our event, we actually ask, when was the last time you gave 100% of yourself? And it's just cool seeing those responses, because most of the time it's like, hey, it was in high school during football. It was like 20, 30 years ago. It was just like, very rarely will you meet a man that truly plays at 100%. That's really giving all of himself. And I fail in that area, or I miss the mark on that area, right? I don't always give my all, right? And I think right, we talk about the 4 pillars, and the importance of the 4 pillars is their order too, though, right? So you can have faith, family, fitness, and finance, but which one they need to be in that order, right? And the focus on that specific order. So they're in order on purpose. And what happens is if you can give your all in business, but if you're giving your all in business and not in your faith, you're going to become majorly skewed and out of balance. And so for people thinking about, man, I want to go all out. What if you went all out in your faith? Like what would 100% look like in your faith? It doesn't mean you have to go and do ministry full time. It means that when you're present with God, like you're all in. When you're reading the Bible, you're all in. Like you're dedicating more time to Him, right? It's like it's really starting to lean and give all of your heart to Him. And so, I love that idea of giving 100% or really going all in on something. It's just so rare. It's very rare that anybody lives with that level, and it requires a level of passion, I think, to do that too.
Right. Yeah. That's good. So I think we as men protect ourselves by saying, well, if I give it 70, 80%, especially if we're slightly gifted in an area, others think we're kind of all in. We know we haven't fully given it all, and that protects us. Because if it fails, we say, well, I wasn't fully into that anyway, or I didn't really try. It's a coping mechanism to protect ourselves.
And, that's actually how I grew up. I was a 70% guy.
Yeah, but you had talent.
I did. I was able to go.
You could cover that.
I got B's through school for studying 10 minutes for every exam. I mean, I never studied.
You got by and didn't have to give it your all.
100%. And so that was a challenge. I was good at barely giving any effort or minimal effort. And so that's eventually I met my wife, and she, Jessica was totally different. With the things she did, she gave her all. So she would finish, like she'd do a project and she'd take it all the way to the end, like 100%, not like 99. She'd finish it to the T. Like, wow, that's so interesting. That's like, I do just enough to produce a great result.
Yeah. Cause your results driven like I am. So like, we got the job done. We're good.
100%. So she was different. So I think that actually helped shift my mindset too. And there was multiple times. I love hearing that, because basically those memories, those moments, that the pain of not going all in really served you, right? It really served you. I remember there was this one race I was running, and I was competing versus this group of guys, and I was at the very front leading the entire time. And then I started to give about 90. I gave 100%, probably 90% of the way, and then I dropped to 95%, and I was like still booking it. And then this one guy, man, just went right past me. This brutal race. I'd given everything. I was destroyed. And at the very last, right before the finish line, went right past me. I was so pissed. I'm like, I will never forget this moment, dude. When I'm going to do something, I'm going to make sure I give all of myself to it. I don't want to feel this level of pain and regret again. Like I'm going, if I'm doing something, I'm going all out on it. So
come on.
Yeah, it resonates.
So the quote, as I tie this in the Ninja Warrior, I was seeing that and thinking about it. I felt it in my spirit. Like, I want to go for this. Yeah. But the thing that pushed me over the edge was when I bumped up against all the obstacles that are there in anything we do, all the uncertainty. I remembered that the pain of failure is weighed in ounces, but the pain of regret is weighed in tons. And I had a lot more regret in my past than I had failure, because I had played it safe. So I thought, do I want to repeat this cycle again? Do I want to go around the mountain? Do I want to be in the wilderness another season? Or do I want to go all in for this thing? So that was the mindset shift. I'd rather fail my way through this and then say I left it all on the field and I can walk away and turn the page, versus I wonder if, 10 years later, I wonder what it would be like if I had gone for it. What would life be like? So I made that mindset shift, went all in, and I got tested in it. Applying, getting rejected. Okay, don't take that too personally. Don't quit. Apply again, get rejected. Okay, what else can I do? There was a walk-on process they had, kind of like college sports. And I ended up finding a way to walk on. I camped out for 2 weeks, took all my vacation for a year, camped out in Dallas, actually.
Wait, so you took all your vacation for a year. You camped out?
Yeah, the way that the process worked, when Ninja Warrior announces its season, and then the regions, the 4 regions, they'll say there's a South, North, East, and West region. The South region was in Dallas, and I was living in Houston at the time. And so they start building the course. It takes them about 3 weeks to build it. And once they finally have it done, then they bring all the cameras in. They bring the contestants that they've accepted through the audition process out. They have a few testers that run the course to make sure it's okay. And they say, all right, contestants, here's your course. You've never seen it before. You've never done it before. You can't practice it. But tonight is the night we're going to compete. And so during that 2 to 3 week build process, people at that time could show up, hopeful contestants like me that got rejected from the application process. They could show up, and loosely the first 10 to 20 in line would get a shot as a walk-on. They were like a glorified tester. So a few testers would test the course and, something would break or something would mess up and they'd fix it. And they'd say, okay, now it's ready for the real contestants. But before the real contestants go, we'll let some of the walk-ons try. And so you're kind of a bridge between the accepted side, but your run would still count as far as you could move on if you did well enough. So a few walk-ons have made it through and then become part of the show later. So to do that, you had to get a spot in line. So the first season, it was a few days ahead. People would show up and they got chosen. But after the awareness of that grew, hundreds would show up. And they're all dedicated. They've been training from different walks of life. So I showed up, maybe it was like 12 days before, and there were already 8 people in line or 7 people in line. So I got a spot. You camp out so you don't lose your spot. And
what does camping out look like?
It was like the Dallas Fairgrounds or somewhere
Would you
around
actually
that
have
area.
a tent?
Yeah, so we had tents spread out.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Some of us would sleep in our cars there at the spot. And basically, like, as long as you were there, you could leave for an hour and go to the gas station, go to the bathroom, come back in, and people would hold your spot. But if you tried to go back home to Houston, you lost your spot. You come back, and now you're 28th in line, or you're now 50th in line. Mm-hmm. Long story short, I ended up getting on that season, almost beating the first round, doing well, but moving on to the next round by 1 spot. So I was kind of done. And they didn't show my run. So typically they'll show, out of the 100 contestants there, they'll show about 30 of those contestants' runs. And they choose the storyline that they want to show and highlight. They choose the people, not based off of the success they had, but based off how they want to show someone falling on the first obstacle, someone making it to the 5th, someone beating the whole thing and climbing the wall. So 3rd year in, I get accepted. I'm in Africa, fly back home, and I compete in Oklahoma City for a regional. I end up beating that round, beating the next round, which was a huge win. Got put on TV, had a lot of friends in the stands, wearing T-shirts. Had a big feedback. They talked about a story of me doing some mission work overseas. So working in some orphanages in Africa and then drilling water wells in Latin America. That's something I'd been doing the past 3 years before, just kind of based off my new conviction to not live about myself, but make it about a bigger story and just plug in where I can. So I accepted some invites to some of these mission trips, had some film stuff from that. I never used it or talked about it publicly, but in my story of applying for the show, I began to say, what can I change? Because I've gone all in my first year, done what I knew to do, didn't work. 2nd year, I made some adjustments, still didn't work. 3rd year, someone told me, stop just showing athletic things, show more about your life, what you believe in, your mission, communicate more. And at that time, I was terrified to speak, terrified to be on a camera. I just wanted to be an athlete, but I did not want to be a communicator. But I was forced to adapt and grow. Little did I know, God was using that carrot of me being interested in Ninja Warrior to teach me how to be a communicator, to how to have the confidence and willingness to step up on a stage and share what God's done in my life. And so I didn't know it, but all of this journey was to bring me into a new place of kind of getting into this ministry and leadership and communication space. So long story short, got my 3rd year, did well, made it to the national finals, broke my ankle the night before the national finals, started experiencing the side of injury and adversity, chose to come back from that. Year 4 came back, 1 spot away from the national finals and got eliminated. And year 5, 1 spot away from the national finals, got eliminated. And my goal was to get to the national finals and at least make it to the final round where you could win $1 million. That's the prize of the ultimate champion of Ninja Warrior. And they only had 2 champions up to that point I think I was on my 6th year of applying. That was season 9. So I'm going for it. Very few people ever win this thing because it's not like the Super Bowl where the final team gets the trophy. You have to beat the entire 6 rounds of these courses. So the last person that actually does that wins, but most people never get past the 4th round or maybe the 5th round.
Got it.
So my 6th year, I'm like, all right, God, I'm tired of almost. So I'm going to go all in this last season. And if it's not working, then I'm going to make an adjustment. But I know I didn't quit. I gave it everything I had. And I also paralleled that with sensing it's time for me to step away. So I step away from my career. So I finished up an assignment in Africa, resigned, flew back to Houston, then flew to Las Vegas for the national finals, competed, beat the first round. And I'm like, all right, great. We're doing good here in the finals. Got deathly ill with massive food poisoning. Thought it was malaria from being over in Africa and West Africa where we had a lot of malaria cases. Puking my guts up and diarrhea for 12 hours in my hotel room, which started immediately after I beat the first round. You come back the next night for the 2nd round, and someone had to come pick me up, carry me down there in a golf cart, brought me to the course. I looked deathly ill. And so people are like, you can't compete. You got to be eliminated. And I'm like, I'm not quitting. I'm going for this thing. I'm going to, do something. So they put me in an ambulance, juiced me up with an IV.
There we go.
Someone came over and prayed for me, and I stumbled my way onto the starting line. I could barely do a pull-up in the warm-up area. Like, well, God, you brought me to this point, and at least if I go out, I'll go out saying I put it all on the line, and I'll be an example that way. So I had my t-shirt. It said illuminate, Matthew 5:14, 16. You're the light of the world. Let your light shine before others.
Yeah.
They may see your glory or see your good works and glorify God. So I was like, all right. And I take off for the first obstacle and just kind of hit with a surge of strength and energy. And suddenly I get to the first one, the second one, the third one, fourth one. Timer's going down from 3 minutes to 2 minutes to 1 minute. Find myself at the last obstacle, like dangling off the second to last obstacle, get through it. And the last one was like diving into these big water tanks underwater, opening these big heavy gates and like cranking this big wheel and going under it. So you're gassed, no oxygen, and you're underwater, and fighting my way through it. And I see these red lights start flashing, and suddenly I pull the last gate open, and I thought the red lights flashing meant that my time had expired. But in hindsight, they start flashing when you have 10 seconds left. And so as they're flashing, I'm pulling the last gate open. I slide through this gate underwater, hop out, climb up to the top, and I see this little podium with a pole and a buzzer on the top of it. And I slap this buzzer, and I see these sparks and fly showers and lighting go off, smoke everywhere. And I see these lights just flashing like crazy. And I look up and I see the timer has 1.9 seconds left on it. And I just kind of erupt like, whoa, had a moment of, wow, God, that was an incredibly rewarding experience for the 6 years of hell I went through at that point. And then I collapse and pass back out, and they have to bring a
actually passed out.
up. Yeah, I don't remember anything after that. They brought a lift up and said they carried me down and then put me on a stretcher, and I was out for a couple hours. Like I'd come back too, but I was just in a bad space. And then they said, all right, now you got to go to the last round to win your $1 million chance. And I couldn't even stand up. So I did like one more obstacle and was out. So it all kind of like this massive almost, and it was a big, exciting culmination of that world, that career in a sense. But it didn't end in the $1 million prize. It kind of ended in a failure in a certain sense. I'd quit my job. I hadn't quit my job going all in on Ninja Warrior, but that was one of the things I wanted to be sure that I had gone all in on. All right, God, what am I doing next? And that began the next chapter, which, well, if you have a question, you can ask it there, or I'll roll into this next phase.
Yeah. What would you say was the biggest lesson that you learned? And you shared a story before around your moral. There was a conversation we had around Mexico or Latin America and right, being morally just having high morals.
Okay.
Out there.
That's going to come next.
Okay. Yeah.
I can dive into that.
Let's dive into that.
Because you're talking about, even through this journey, once I decided to be all into my faith, I decided, you know what? Porn, lust, casual sex, some of these things had been a struggle in my life. And as I gave my life fully to Jesus, I was like, what does it look like to fully live with integrity, accountability, and to prepare for my future marriage instead of trying to just enjoy things or have relationships that are in some kind of moral gray zone? So a decision I made back in 2012, 2013, I was like, you know what? I'm not having sex until I get married. And you know what? I'm breaking this porn struggle. It's a coping mechanism. And I had people counsel me and say, hey, don't think that that's going to go away when you get married. Go ahead and get rid of this now, because it's gonna rise up in your marriage in a bigger way. So fix it now. And I was like, oh, okay. I was making an excuse. I was just thinking porn's better than sleeping around, and it's a coping mechanism. So I dove in all in to like, what is it going to look like for me to change some of these habits, get a bigger picture here, break through this stuff. Went all in, cleaned up my environment, my music I was listening to, the things I was watching, the friends that I hung around with. So that really purified my spirit. So I hadn't had sex in this whole process, even though I'd been in a couple of relationships. And now we're moving into 2019. I've quit my job, just had the Ninja Warrior story. The next thing I had planned was taking my dad to Israel. My dad I'd convinced him to retire as a pastor. He was 60 at the time. It's like, Dad, we need to make some changes. Like, pastoring is, you're good at it, but it's also not financially going to help you. You have no financial basis or future. You have no money. We need to do something to help set you up for a little bit more of a retirement, because I just quit my job, so I can't help support you guys because of my career. I don't know what's going to come next for me. One of the things I had done to convince him to do that was like, let's buy this house and you renovate it because you're good at that. So we were renovating a house. I used the carrot of, I'll take you to Israel when we finish this. So he finishes the house. I take him to Israel, also just working on repairing our relationship because we didn't have the best one.
Sure.
And encouraging him to continue as a 60-year-old man, continue to work through fears, anger, shame, things that are holding you back. So take him there, come back. It was an incredible trip. He'd always wanted to go to Israel, but could never afford to and couldn't prioritize it. When I come back from that, my Ninja Warrior episode of that final round aired on TV, and they put me on TV for it. Again, they don't show everyone that's been on there, regardless of how well you did or not. When it aired, They featured me because of the sickness I had, because of how bad it was. The other 10 people that had made it that far and beaten that round, the final 10 out of the thousands that compete, some of them didn't get featured because there wasn't much adversity in the story. But because of what I'd gone through, they're like, this is a great story. We're going to highlight it. So they highlighted that element of how sick I was in the years before when I'd broken my ankle and torn my shoulder out of socket and doing a few other things. So they kind of did this montage of all these things he's gone through and some kind of cool things. This guy's been in the North Pole when he lived in Norway. He's been in Africa doing some unique things, rafting the Nile River. He's been in Latin America doing some mission work. And so they showed all that. It was kind of a culmination of my Ninja Warrior experience, the highs and lows. It airs, and I'm like, okay, what comes next? The next was about a month later, get a call from loosely a producer of another TV show. Hey, we saw your experience there. We've got a TV show. It's owned by NBC. It takes Ninja Warrior and Survivor, puts them together. It's in Latin America. It's with Latin American celebrities. So gold medalist from Puerto Rico in gymnastics, World Cup soccer player, team captain from Mexico, a few different people in that realm come together on this show and compete for 6 months, elimination style, and the last person standing wins the prize and is the champion. And it's Ninja Warrior in the day and it's Survivor at night. Are you interested? It's like, wow, yeah, I'm interested. They're like, we've never had a gringo on the show. It's only in Spanish. You'd be the first person, apply, but low chance of getting it. Long story short, God made a way. I got on. January 1st, 2020, I'm heading down to the Dominican Republic in this compound where this production company from Turkey films the show, and then they sell it to NBC and Telemundo and networks around the world. And the network chooses the contestants. So this network, Telemundo, which is USA based, to Latinos in the USA and Latinos all over Latin America, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, any Latin American country. That's who's watching. So I get on, and we've got millions of viewers every day. This TV show is on every day for 2 hours. They're filming us for 24 hours a day through the hardship of surviving and eating rice and beans, living in a shack with no air condition, no cell phone, no TV, no internet for the 6 months I was there, totally off the grid. And it's half men, half women. So we'll get to your statement about the morality piece. I'm an outsider coming into this situation. They've got 10 beautiful women that are pro athletes from different parts of the world. They've got 10 men like myself. And
10 good-looking men.
10 good-looking men. They choose good-looking people as well because they want the audience to be engaged.
100%, yeah.
And they choose people with personalities and some charisma. So you're on camera 99% of the time. There's little places where people could kind of slip off. You have no coping mechanisms. There's no Netflix and relax. There's no good food or supplements. There's no reward except for in the competition. Every once in a while, it's like, hey, the winning team tonight gets a pizza dinner with Coke and some cake. And you're like, whoa, I've just had rice, beans, and a couple of boiled eggs. I'd love that. Or the winning team's going to get to watch a movie tonight. I'm like, I haven't seen TV in 2 months. I'd love to watch a movie and just sit down, be in the air conditioning. That sounds great. So those little things become really big things in that sense. And you're not talking to your friends or your family. You're totally isolated. And in that isolation, it heightens other things. So the other things is like you're around some really hot women every day. You're living with them in this little shack. Everyone's sharing a little outhouse in the back.
Wow.
You're not seeing each other naked or changing, but it's a family show. And they're not trying to get you, they don't give you alcohol. They're not trying to get you drunk and make this wild experience like Big Brother. But they also know some of that's going to go on, and they're kind of looking to capture it and hoping some romances bud in this equation. I'd gone in there saying, one, I'm not looking for a wife here on a reality TV show with people that mostly are opportunistic to be on TV. Keep my guard up. Two, keep your moral parameters up. Like don't get caught slipping up. Don't sleep with someone here. What's the point of that? Plus you're on TV. I've stated my Christian faith there and before, so people have a heightened awareness of what I say I live for. So I know I'm on the spotlight. One situation happened. I don't remember if I told you the story, but I'll tell it for the audience. I got tested in that plenty. Now, I was single when I went on the show, so I wasn't in a relationship. I'm still treating the way I live my life as I'm in a relationship. Just because I'm single doesn't mean like I'm available to do whatever I want to do. And there was one contestant on the show that her and I had some chemistry. We had a friendship, but I could sense some flirtation going on, and her willingness for things to go further. Should I choose to go down that path, we'll leave it at that. And I kept it friendship based. But there was one night, hurricane came through, knocked out power. The cameras weren't working. Our team snuck off down the road in this compound where we were to like another house that was kind of throwing a house party. So we kind of broke out of the prison, and people our chaperones weren't watching us as effectively, and got to have a little party down there. So people were drinking and hanging out, and then some of the producers found out and come down there and screaming at us and herd us back over. But in that process, we're kind of out of our prison bounds. There's an opportunity for me in that process of getting back to where we were staying. We'll say an opportunity, and I'm being vague for different reasons, especially if my girlfriend's listening, which I've told her this story before, so okay. she knows the details, but I'm trying to keep it PG. Opportunity arises, and with a certain someone, and in my mind, I'm like, okay, I could go down this road, metaphorically speaking, and no one would know, or I can look for that way out that God says is always there in temptation. And I said, Lord, I need help in this. I need a way out. And there's a pause of the way we were progressing back to our place. And I was like, hey, or this person said, you want to meet me over here in this place where we know that there's no cameras? I was like, yeah, go over there. And I needed a way to get away from her. She heads over there. I head a different way, and I run back to my room, get in my room with my roommate, lock the door, turn on the fan. We had a fan in this one spot, turn it on loud, lay down. And then I'm like, I'm not answering the door. And then a little while later, you hear, toot, 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 toot. I just didn't answer it. And then we talked about some of that later, but it was just one reminder of look for the way out, even in temptation, even in moments. I mean, we're struggling in this show. I think we're 3 months in at that point, just isolated, and people are hooking up behind the scenes. Some are hooking up that are married, and no one's going to know about it. But I'm not living my life based off of what people are going to know about. I'm living my life between my connection of God and myself, the character and integrity I want to live by and hold myself to, and how I'm going to carry myself in rooms. Even if no one's going to know something I chose to do, I'm going to know, God's going to know, and I'm not going to be able to carry that same level of authority and integrity. And in knowing who I am, if I've made a mistake, I can repent from it and I can correct, but I'm also not going to preach and say, here's where I've made my stand if it's not true. So I got faced with that. And I've been tested plenty of times before, being overseas and other places in the past 7 years leading up to that. But I've seen God had used these situations of preparation to then allow me to be in a high pressure cooker situation that had great value and reward. And I'm preaching to millions every day and sharing my faith, but I'm also seeing opportunity for the enemy to take me out. And I was aware, I was ready, I was staying guarded and grounded. And so it helped me get through those unique circumstances, among many others, in that 6-month period of not even knowing COVID had broken out and the world had shut down. We were still locked away.
You guys are still, you didn't even know that. You don't even, wow.
Going at it.
What, man, that's inspiring. I think we got to cut that little clip and send it out to our crucible guys. We got a lot of guys that are single, figuring out how to stay, right? How to stay diligent when it comes to their sexual purity. Yeah. Very challenging in today's world, for sure, with pornography and lust and just everything going on. It's very difficult. And so, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, but it's the reminder in there. It's difficult, but it's possible. Yeah, and it's possible with a vision. And I've learned restraint without the revelation of that restraint leads to rebellion. So if you just have a rule that we've attached to something, let's just say don't have sex before you're married. Well, that's just a rule that I now have. And the level of trust I have in the person giving me that rule or boundary is going to dictate the level that I rebel against it. So if I really trust that person and their guidance, I'm going to believe it and take it for their word. But the less I trust them or believe what they're saying, the more I'm going to rebel against it. And the flip side of that trust is if I have the revelation of why it's important. And so when I gain a revelation of, you know what, in the sexual sense, God created sex. It's a beautiful thing. It's not a bad thing, but the enemy hijacks it and uses it to rob from us and steal, kill, and destroy. John 10:10, Jesus said the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus came to give abundant life. And I learned through some of the hijacking of my sexuality, it was a consumption-based mindset. It was what's in it for me? What can I get from this? This is a coping mechanism. It's not bringing me abundant life, but I learned that, there's a healthy way to have that in a marriage when you build the right foundation. And financially, I've learned how to build a good foundation, how to live within my means, how to save and not spend on things on credit cards, how to invest. And then when I've done that well, it's led to an abundance in my future. I was like, well, how about I apply the same thing to my sexuality? Instead of paying for things on a credit card, how about I save? How about I build my mindset, guard my purity, because I'm building towards my future marriage and protecting my marriage, protecting her, and also not letting these things control me. because I realized I could be controlled by impulses. I could be controlled by a frustrating or stressful situation that I'd turn for a coping mechanism. So the people listening that have wrestled with it, one, you have to know that victory is possible, and our identity in Christ means that we fight from a place of victory, not from a hopeful, maybe I could get victory one day. We already have that authority and that positioning. We have to learn to identify with that and realize, oh, that is something I've already been given. I have the authority of Jesus in my spirit, and I have examples. I got examples from others that this is possible. And when I realized it's possible, it changed my mindset. Because before I was like, it's not possible. Like, I just give in to lust and I look at porn and I masturbate when I feel like it. And realizing, oh, that's possible to not be locked into that place of some kind of addiction. And then I got a bigger perspective of what's going on and how the porn industry fuels human trafficking. And I heard about human trafficking and like the horrific things that are going on to this day. More people enslaved now than at any other point in history. And we think slavery has been abolished. And while it has in the first world sense, still hundreds of millions that are locked in that. So without going down the rabbit trail, you have to have this vision of what's possible and then build some habits and disciplines around it, have accountability, realize the enemy uses shame to keep us bound and isolated and thinking, I'm the only one that struggles with this. I'm the only one in this place. So when we could speak about it to our friends, our brothers that we trust, we get it out on the table. And then, the Bible says, confess your sin one to another that you may be healed. Well, the enemy's telling you, don't share this with anybody. Don't talk about this. Keep it to yourself. And what happens when you keep something in a dark, cold place? Mold, growth, bacteria, it just warps into something twisted versus getting it out, cutting that stuff out, getting cleaned. And then now I can, while I still have plenty of sexual drive and plenty of temptation, that lower nature doesn't drive me. It's something I can say, no, that's not the place for this. So I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to apply it. And it's not always as easy as that. And yet I have been able to live from that place. And so making that decision that I'm not having sex until I get married and I'm not playing in these gray areas, I didn't know that I was going to go 12 more years living that out. I just knew for the next year, I've committed to that.
So wow, solid, man. So good. I'm inspired by your level of character and determination. And I love the thought. I love the way you worded that, right? The restraint without revelation. I think that's pretty important, right? Because we human beings, we have a tendency to rebel. I'm pretty hardcore, right? Yeah. So I was a rebellious child. I grew up in the faith and grew up a believer, but man, I definitely rebelled, and it was really ineffective. Caused a lot of damage, hurt a lot of people. I remember when I was one of the things that really helped me stop looking at porn completely, right, and completely really break free from it was not that I wasn't supposed to look at it. That didn't help me break free from pornography. It was one of the key things was the revelation that the damage of looking at pornography, because it's not just hurting me. Right. By me going on to Pornhub or different websites, dude, I was fueling the porn industry, which has massive consequences, right? I'm funding the whole thing. One of the darkest, most evil industries in the world, I'm personally funding by being a visitor. I'm like, that is just disgusting to me. Like I couldn't live with that. So I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be the one funding that and be the one showing up as a visitor on that and giving them the results that they want. So I'm like, okay, I'm done with that. I'm not willing to be that guy. And so that was huge. That was a big help for me. And then I eventually transitioned from not looking at pornography then to not using Instagram, right? Then that's like the next tier, right? Not using Instagram or other social media websites to stay too long on inappropriate images or inappropriate videos on side there. And then that was a whole nother journey of kind of processing through to the point where I've found full freedom, not from lust completely, right? So I might have a thought that might wander, or I might feel the feeling of it, or I might look too long for a moment at something, but I've really broken free from the hold that pornography had on me for most of my life. And so I love the idea of revelation. So it's like, it's the prayer. It's like, hey, Lord, I want to break free from porn. Please continue to help me through giving me the willpower, giving me the strength, the courage, and also some additional revelation, like the knowledge, the understanding of why that's important. I think when we want it bad enough too, we'll be ready to change. That's right. Right. It's got to be that important to us where we're like, no, I see the destruction that this causes internally. Like I see the grip that it has on me. I don't want something to have that kind of grip on me. Right. I'm willing to, I'm committed now to break free from that. I love it. What would you say, and let's talk about fun for a moment. a hard shift. What is your, as entrepreneurs, as men, right? We get very focused on things. And so what's been a process that you've used to enjoy life, to go have fun? I tend to be one of those guys that I just went on a 9-day trip with my dad to Europe last week, which is super cool. But in general, I tend to be a lot more focused. Yeah. I'd rather focus. I'd rather be creating and building things than messing around and going and having fun. And I love having fun though too. Like that's a natural part of my spirit. Yet I've pushed that back and tend to be a little bit more focused. What are some ways that you have fun? How do you keep that an important part of your life?
Yeah, good question. It's seasonal in the sense that when I worked in the corporate world and had the structure that provided, I learned how to interject fun into things. Now as an entrepreneur, I'll loosely call myself that. I find it much harder because, one, I don't feel like I've earned it in certain ways because the goal always seems to end and I haven't hit the same financial wins that I would get consistently in the corporate world. And so I try to make it a place where I reward myself in the process of setting something. And then when I've achieved that goal.
Where'd you learn that? That's interesting. Cause that's what I teach, right? Cause we're always focused on the goal. We hit the goal and then we move on to the next goal without any reward. So
I don't know that I learned it as much as I observed it in myself, where I would make a promise to myself about, okay, when you hit this metric, reward yourself. I'd get there and I'd say, I haven't really earned it. It's not yet. And I kind of kept moving the goalpost and I realized it wore me down. I wasn't finding fulfillment or enjoyment. I was breaking promises to myself. So where I really built it in, and this for those in the corporate world, I ended up getting on more and more business trips because of the nature of the work I was doing. And I was single and available to travel. So I was taking on more of that than some of the guys who couldn't leave their families as easily. But if I had a week trip somewhere, I'm going to California or Colorado or Wyoming or Louisiana, I would bake in a day in the front end or the back end, typically the back end, before I'd come home. And I would make it mandatory, and I would talk to my manager and supervisors about it. And we'd agree, yeah, you can stay one more day. You'll cover your costs, but we'll cover your flight back. So what I baked in early on was wherever I am in the country or even in the city, I'm going to go find one interesting thing when I finish my work. So our last meeting was Friday afternoon, or I managed a project, we pack it up. Instead of flying out Friday night, I'd say I'm going to fly out Saturday morning, and I'd go find something to do. So it started off simple, but it worked its way up to when I'm in California. All right, now I'm going to go spend Friday evening on the beach somewhere, and I'm going to have a nice meal on the beach, and then maybe wake up, do a workout, or 12 years ago, I'll go party for somewhere. I'll go to a bar and go hang out there and just be social and have a little fun, and then wake up the next morning and fly back home. Well, as that grew, I just continued to segment that. And most people are like, I don't have time for that. We got to get back to work. We got to get back to this. We got to get back to that. I'm like, no, you've got a moment here where you could build that in if you prioritize it. I did the same thing with exercise. How do you have time? You work a high demand corporate job. How do you have time to not only exercise, but train for Ninja Warrior? Just discipline myself to work it in different places and made it a priority. And I scheduled it and I adhered to that part most of the time. So that built up to where suddenly now I'm taking business trips to Africa, and I'm in Africa for 3 weeks. And on the flight home, we have a layover in Amsterdam. And what I would do there, all right, I get a couple of comp days because I've lost them in travel, because it takes you 2 days of travel over there and they don't charge that to you. So if I lost Saturday, Sunday of traveling, they'll give me back Monday and Tuesday. So I'm returning back from Africa. My flight's landing from Africa to Amsterdam on, let's call it Sunday. And I just move my flight back to Tuesday. So my flight from Amsterdam to Houston is going to be Tuesday instead of Saturday or Sunday. So now I got 2 days in Europe. Like, cool. Well, I don't want to do anything in Amsterdam. I don't want to go smoke weed in some cafe. I want to do something that's actually cool and exciting. So, there's a $100 flight to going into Switzerland. Boom, into Switzerland. All right, what am I going to do here? I've talked for years about hang gliding. All right, finally, I'm just going to pull the trigger. It scares me, but I'm going to do it. Hang gliding with a tour guide that looked like Mel Gibson or an instructor. He takes me down this mountainside. We're gliding away, and all of a sudden we hit this big updraft pocket, and we just go 1,000 foot up, 2,000 foot up, 3,000 foot up. We're just getting higher and higher. Incredible view over the Alps. I'm like losing my mind with excitement. He's like, this is amazing, mate. I've never seen something like this. He's from Australia. And so we glide our way down after like 15 minutes of just cruising around in the sky. Incredible. I was like, that's the most amazing thing I've ever experienced. And so I had one more day. I was like, well, tomorrow I'm going to go ski. It's still March. We still got some good weather. So I went and skied on the Alps. Just made the most of it. Yeah. Next trip through there, rode on the Autobahn, went really fast, and then I went bungee jumping. And so those are the extreme sides of what I'd built in for 5 or 6 years before, of just one little quick trip to the beach. Okay, I'm over here in the mountains. Let me just drive up to that lookout point and do a quick hike. Oh, I'm in New Orleans. There's not much to do. Let me just go to a restaurant and treat myself to a nice meal. Or let me go see a friend just by staying over a certain day when I have a layover in Oklahoma City and I don't know what to do. I would just work that in. And so as I've grown, I've continued to keep that boundary.
Right.
And I'm going to do it with my future family. I'm going to do it whatever the new things are. So now when I go do events, I got one in Anaheim, California in a month. And a buddy of mine said, hey, I want to stay over with you an extra day and we'll go do something fun. So we're going to go do a Spartan race, which not everyone's view of fun, but for me, it's kind of a mix of a challenge and fun and camaraderie. So I've just tried to make that principle, whatever it is, add in a little bonus. It's small. It's not a $5,000 vacation for a week. Just one little small thing that gets me back and I'm a little refreshed when I hit the ground running when I get home. So good. That's an important thing that I've been making more of a priority in my life, is kind of just enjoying things, enjoying the journey, right? And having fun and taking time. My wife's pretty focused too. So she'll go pretty hard on creation, on family, and all these things, and then kind of put fun last. And so, just wanted to talk about that for a moment. It's good. So notice who you are in your personality. In the Exxon world, I was the only person that would think about any kind of fun. I saw people head down, grinding, and sometimes frustrated. They'd forget to, celebrate an 18-month project. We finished it. So it's like, all right, here's the next one. And I'd say, whoa, let's do a team building event. Let's do something. Let's just take a break to enjoy this. And so when I'm on my own and I'm the one that's driving, I allow other people to interrupt me with hey, we haven't done anything fun in a while. You need this in your family. Your kids can get worn down a bit. Take them to a theme park one day, do something. And then when you hit a big milestone, when you sell a company, when you do something else, then do a real trip. Take your dad overseas for a week or two. Do something significant, like make a monument out of that season where you completed something, because you gave a lot to it. You sacrificed a lot to it. So don't forget to have that monument. And I can look back in those memories and be grateful for them.
I'd love to, as we close out, I'd love to talk about the activation of men, right? And kind of your heart around that. So let's talk about that. What does it mean to be an activated man?
Great question. For me, it was breaking out of a religious mindset and realizing God doesn't call us to live through an endless amount of pain and misery and suffering just for the sake of being a believer. Yes, we sign ourselves up in this life to have pain, suffering, frustration, but in the sense of being a kingdom-minded man, I think as men, we tend to be, one, apathetic. Our first sin as humans was Adam withdrawing from his position of leadership and authority, abdicating that to his wife, letting her make a decision, and then not intervening, and then just choosing to go along with it. And so I could see a lot of apathetic parts about myself and places where I'm not very aware. So as I started realizing bit by bit, I'm not very aware. I don't like asking deeper questions. And yet I'm tired of going through the same patterns. Something's got to change and something's got to break. So the book that woke me up the most was Wild at Heart by John Eldredge. I'm sure that's a staple in your circles. That was a powerful book to just realize, man, I'm meant for more. There's more going on. It's possible, but I have to begin to become more aware that we're in a war. And if you're in a war, you have a different mindset than when you're in peace. When you're in the Shire versus in the hills of Mordor, in the Lord of the Rings example, you have a very different mindset. Most guys are just waltzing around looking for the coping mechanism. Let me have a few glasses of alcohol at night to numb the frustration of dealing with my wife and my kids. Let me, use golf as an escape. And then let me kind of keep grinding away at the job because it's the only thing I feel significant or rewarded at. I realized if I begin addressing certain questions in my life, looking at men that inspired me and sometimes intimidated me, or even ones that I would get jealous of, and ask the question instead of running from and suppressing the feeling. Because we as men, I think we suppress feelings pretty well. We suppress emotion. Yes, we don't want to be overly emotional and controlled by our emotion, but these are feedback loops that we need that God gave us. And mine was so suppressed, I didn't have feelings on a lot of things. And so I could just kind of put my head down and keep going.
Well, naturally, as an engineer, man, ripping feelings out of an engineer is very challenging.
So I just believed by examples of other men that there was a more abundant life available, but I knew it was going to come at the end of a process of being willing to ask deeper questions, allow men to challenge me in a good way and encourage me. Women need more encouragement and men need more challenge. And yet we both need the same. Like we need to be encouraged as well. And so my first win, and for those listening that don't know what it looks like, you haven't shown up to an event that Skylar's holding, you haven't done something outside of your comfort zone. My first win was just getting myself around other men that were living in a bigger way. I could sense they had a bigger purpose and meaning. They could assign purpose to their pain They didn't use their excuses as a reason to stop doing something in their roles as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a business leader, or as an employee. You know, I was an employee for all of my business life. I was never the leader. I led projects, but I would put myself in an environment. I'd show up at a gym environment where people were further along than me. And instead of being like, oh, I don't want to be shown how weak I am or how I'm not as far along as those guys, I realized most people that have gone somewhere in life like you, they look down towards someone that's not as far along, and they'll speak a lot of encouragement. Man, way to go for it. They're not going to shame you. The same in the gym. It's the same in the spiritual world. So now I'd show up at a church environment. Yes, I'm uncomfortable. Yes, I don't want to be exposed for how lacking I am in this world. Same in the gym, same in business. But I learned that if I'll put myself in those environments, there's always someone that's going to extend a hand and pull me forward a little bit. Give me some encouragement. Give me a reminder. And as I grow, I see there's a new level. I'm a little higher up on the mountain. I have a better view. I can see further than when I was down in the valley. And I can, oh man, there is more life and abundance here. It's worth it. So what I want to call you men to is this mindset of, as a kingdom man, one, we're called to choose our hard. Life is going to be hard no matter which way you go about it. Choose the hard that has great value. So when you're willing to do some hard work, addressing and digging into emotions, when you're willing to do some physical hard work, when you're willing to go there with your wife, when you just want to avoid the conflict or the thing, when you're willing to take accountability, that hard produces great value. But when you choose the hard of avoiding those things, of choosing alcohol as the medication, of avoiding conflict with your wife, of not showing up for your kids, you're going to experience the hardship of a failed relationship, the hardship of a financial failure, the hardship of your health collapsing on you, when now it's going to take you all the money you've ever made to try to recoup that. So choose the hard that has the one of great value. Don't let the thought of an easy path of avoidance trap you into a place where your life is going to become miserable. And so a kingdom man is one who's willing to take accountability and not be a victim. And that's a story of my life where I've had plenty of opportunities to be a victim, came from nothing, had plenty of setbacks that could have defined me. And instead, I allowed that adversity to be an activator in my life. Because we as men, we are made to rise to the occasion. And we've seen the examples of other men that rise up to the occasion. So rise up, kings. Rise up to the occasions, the adversity that confronts us. Lock arms with someone who's maybe you're not in their life, but you find a way to get in their life and let them encourage you forward. And you'll be amazed at what your life can become in a year. And I've seen it with my friends. Like, give God a year to work with your life. I heard a phrase, give God something to work with and people something to respect. If we do those things, we'll be amazed at what our life is going to look like in a year. Beautiful, man. Well, I just want to say, this was a great conversation. Your journey is inspiring. And man, I'd love to find some way where we can do some stuff together. You got a good heart, a good mind, and a very grounded guy. So yeah, great conversation. Man, I appreciate you big time coming on the podcast, and maybe we'll go see what's going on with the guys outside right now. Yeah, so. I want to check it out. I want to get involved. For those that are interested, I'm about to release my first book. Oh, great! And on that note, how can people get a hold of you? So, and then what do you got coming? Yep. Yeah, if it's fine for me to share my book, great. The best place to find me at No Limits Nate on social media, and I'm pretty active on Instagram, some on Facebook. My book is going to be No Limits: How Playing It Safe is the Riskiest Thing You Can Do in Life. And I'm going to speak through some examples. It's going to feel a little bit like Green Lights from Matthew McConaughey. Some cool examples and stories, but overall to help people take that next step, believe that God has more, and take a risk instead of playing it safe and learning that that's the darkest place you can end up, where you never went for it in anything in life. So I want to be more involved in your tribe and community. I love what you've built, and I want to support you in whatever way I can. So I hope to meet some of these listeners here. For those that heard something in my story that sounded interesting, you want some feedback, some encouragement, reach out to me. I don't have an offer, but I do men's coaching. I do events. So reach out to me online and let's talk about one of the things that spoke to you. If I can encourage you forward, I'd love to do that. Awesome. Thanks for having me, brother. Yep. Honored. Adios, mi gente.